Hello, I'm Neal Petersen. Welcome back. I've spent isolation in three different types of environments. One was as a solo around the world racing sailor. One was racing with a professional race crew and having multiple people on board. And another was my life at sea as a commercial diver on oil platforms and deep water diving operations. Each three of these occasions were different types of isolation and required slightly different types of mindsets. When I was racing solo around the world, it was probably the most extreme form of isolation, and hopefully none of you are living by yourself in this COVID-19 totally isolated. But if you are, you probably will identify with some of the elements of what I'm going to be sharing with you in this part of my conversation. Now, living alone on a boat and racing solo around the world, you are very focused. You are focused on staying alive. You are focused on positioning yourself because it is a competition. And I'm competing against, in the 1994 around the world race, there were about 19 boats I was competing against. In the 1998 around the world race, my second go at this, I was competing with about 16 boats. So you have a different mindset when you are competing versus just delivering the boat alone. And what I found worked very well for me was establishing certain types of routines. Now, you do not live in a normal time zone. Firstly, I sleep in short naps. It's not where, oh, it's dark, I'm going to bed and I'm going to now sleep all night for 6, 7, 8 hours. You're living in half an hour to 45-minute naps, sometimes a little bit shorter, sometimes a little bit longer. And I found that part of those routines of my naps were when it was perfect conditions, everything was going beautifully, the boat was humming along, nothing was broken, the seas were stable, the winds were stable. Those were the times I could get 1 hour of nap. And then you'd get up for a few minutes, check your instrumentation, look around the horizon, scan for anything that is out of place, and then you go back down for another nap, but they would not be as long if I got a 1 hour nap in. The time I got the least amount of sleep was when there was no wind. And you are sitting in the cockpit. You are either extremely hot if I was in the equatorial regions or extremely cold if I was down in the Southern Ocean. Now, the Southern Ocean was always too much wind, and the safest place in too much wind was actually to be in my cabin, to be in my bunk. And so your world revolved around what were the conditions of how you were getting your sleep. And in COVID-19, you have to establish a sleep discipline, because it is easy to sit and watch late night television. It's easy to be up all night and sleep in the daytime or sleep haphazardly. And with broken sleep, you become more and more exhausted. And as the race would progress, as the days became weeks and the weeks became months, and I mean months, talking about 68 days at sea alone on the first leg of the 1994 race. That's a long time to be in total isolation, not to have somebody to hug, not to have somebody's hand to hold, not to hear somebody say, I love you, face to face. So in that particular time frame, those routines became so critical in getting enough sleep. But as I said, as I got further and further, the exhaustion, you can't stockpile sleep. The exhaustion became more intense. Simple things took longer to do, had to be focused on. Hence, with this luxury of COVID-19, you are not getting in your car and driving to work. You are not running around and doing all kinds of things. Use the time to get some good sleep discipline in place. The second piece that was very important whilst I was solo racing were my meals. Now, I like to have one good meal a day, and I like that meal to be in the latter part of the day, around local time 3:30, 4 o'clock, because it gave me a chance in the mornings to get my series of naps in and to have a very light breakfast or to have a light snack, and then to focus on cooking something that was nutritional, something that was going to be wholesome. And I wanted my dishes done, I wanted my food prepped and eaten, put away before it got dark. Because in the dark, you don't know what's going to happen. All different types of challenges come often in the dark. And that is when I have to be the most alert as well. I found that I could eat one good meal a day and then have a few snacks, but I wasn't snacking as much on junk food. Now, I do love chocolate. And so I did eat a fair amount of chocolate, but I needed that chocolate and I needed those nuts because I needed high energy. The physical demands were so hard on me that I was losing weight. So everything to try and gain weight. But if you're not active, be extremely cautious about what you're eating and when you're eating it. Then there was about getting some exercise. Now, I'm not the type of guy who goes to the gym and does a lot of push-ups and a lot of weights. I tend to be on the deck, working sails, pulling up and down on lines, grinding winches. So you have to find what is it going to take inside of your home, inside of the environment you are now in lockdown, and how you are going to get your exercise. Yes, you can go and fill up a couple of 1 gallon jugs, and you got your dumbbells, 2 1-gallon jugs, one in each hand. You can do some press-ups, using your your bed as a way of doing elevating your legs and lifting in a different way. So there are lots of different forms of being able to get exercise, and this is what I had to do whilst I was racing solo. Now, when I was racing full crew, the routines were very different, because every person on the boat had a responsibility. On some of those races when I was younger, I may have been the foredeck, or I may have been a sail trimmer. Every person has some very specific expertise of why they are on that team. And that team is brought together by the captain. And as a skipper, you've done a little bit of everything on the boat over a period of time. So it is that comprehensive knowledge of knowing what your team is doing, what is expected of your team, and being able to execute maneuvers flawlessly. And the captain's job is not just knowing his team or her team and how to do things. The captain's job is also being able to look at safety. And one of the people who feed information in beyond the safety is your tactician, your navigator, in helping you go from where you are to where you need to go. So teamwork becomes very, very critical. And you are now living in an environment where you may be with a spouse, you may have kids at home. Those are your crew. Who is captain of the household? Who is going to take responsibilities for what entities? And it's also about sharing, it's about learning, it's about fellowship. And as an adult, I can learn something from an 8-year-old kid. I can learn to have fun. I can learn to laugh at the kids' funny jokes. It's about being engaging. It is about getting along with people, finding the best out of each other and bringing out the best. It's not about niggling somebody on some small thing. We had to live in small confines. Sometimes we're not enough bunks, so we shared the bunk. One person got out of a bunk when another person climbed into the bunk. We call it hot bunking. Hopefully you're not having to live in that tight space confinement, but it is things of being in close proximity where tempers can easily flare, where somebody says, oh, I don't feel like doing this. Well, it's not about what you feel like doing, it's about what is needed to be done. This is about teamwork, coming together. And the other part was, as a commercial diver, I ended up traveling the oceans of the world, working, whether it was an underwater diamond mine, or whether it was working on a pipeline that we were laying in the Gulf of Mexico and doing what they call pipe walking, or doing construction work or maintenance work on an oil platform. There, in those environments, we had very set routines. We worked 12 hours on, 12 hours off. But those 12 hours on were sometimes 16 hours, 17 hours. It didn't matter if the weather was nasty or not. Yes, there were certain conditions that we could not work in because it was too extreme. But we had to work within the confines of our circumstances again. And once more I found the routines, the rhythms, the collaboration, the politeness, the ability to find the best in yourself and to bring out the best in others who were strangers, who were not part of your family. That is also very important in how we deal with these different situations. So coming back to COVID-19, each and every one of us find ourselves in different circumstances, having to adapt in different ways to those circumstances. But the most important elements in this time was to be respectful to yourself, to be respectful to your fellow housemates, and to be respectful to our environment, and to be able to look for the outside and what we can bring in from outside inside. But it is to be very protective of what we allow into our minds, what we allow into our spaces. This is an interesting time for reflection and self-development. Use this time wisely. Do not be intimidated by being isolated. Do not be fearful. Fear is not your enemy. Fear is an ally who warns you to pay attention. I know COVID-19 will pass and eventually we'll go back to a somewhat normal life. But when we go back to that normal life, there will always be experiences that we shall draw upon. As I learned how to survive on the high seas racing alone, or as I learned how to live in a full crew racing environment, or work with strangers, there are always important lessons. What are the lessons you are learning today from your fellow roommates or housemates and from our fellow mankind in this journey going forward? I look forward to sharing more with you. Come join us for further conversations. I'm Neal Petersen.